So this is our 65 Galaxie project at the current moment. And when we first got it, it was in a bad way, so to speak. Everything you see here that's painted, anything that's painted at all, was definitely not that color when we got it. It was entirely rusted out. Entirely, so much so that, there's a custom center console in here. It's hard to see. Custom center console, custom welded in floor pans. I mean, all the way back. But this thing was so rusted out that we actually built a new frame for it, which is probably one of the most interesting points about this car, because it has half of it's a 57 Chevy frame that's been chopped and altered for this project. For example, as you can see running back right up here, this is just some steel that we, some steel tubing that we welded onto the torque box up here, which is, I'm sorry it's hard to see, but we welded a whole new torque box on. Walk around here, get to the back. There's the car. New, everything rebuilt under the bottom end. Custom frame, as you can see, coming around. A lot of customization of the frame. In the rear end, we had to relocate and use some of the old parts, but it now sits in there with 411. The drivetrain is a 289 hypo with a T5 5-speed and 411 in the rear end, just rebuilt. And so the gas tank was totally rusted out, and we wanted to put in a fuel cell. But instead of just sitting it in the trunk, since the trunk was totally rusted out, we made a custom trunk here, welded in, with the fuel cell set in. Those are the headers up there. I need to get wrapped and stuff where I put in, but yeah, this car was in a, I don't know how many ways I can say it, real bad way. Had to cut all the Bondo out of there. There's more up that side. Yeah, another look on the car. The car itself hasn't been on the road since about 1984. At that time, before we owned it, it was painted orange and had a lift in the rear. It was kind of ridiculous looking from what I saw, but we've had to fiberglass. Everything's going to need a lot of body work, but all the framework, all the tough stuff is done, converted to dual disc brakes up in the front. Should be pretty good. It's another slight view of our torque box, kinda. It's pretty hard to see under this light, but that's racing seats in it. But mostly there's tons and tons of metal fabrication in this vehicle, like this custom center console here. And actually, good story, if you can see the darkening on the windshield, we caught the firewall on fire when we were welding that in. That kind of sucked, and we melted all our ducts out of the car, so that'll never work right again, but it'll be worth it to be able to fit a T5 under there. Real quick 289 in there. It's turns about 400 horse at about, what was it, like 5,800 or so. Real racy build. Has Boss 302 heads on it, real high flow heads. And as you can see, we still got to get the fenders bolted on, but once you weld on a whole new frame behind the torque boxes, when you weld it on the car, the frame tends to bend a little bit. So we had to do a lot of fudging on here to get these fenders back on, but when we had it, and just until recently, all the doors, the fenders, the trunk lid, everything was off this car. Entirely redone. It's just coming together. In about a month or so, we'll have her back on the road, put all the interior back in. Didn't have a headliner, painted the headliner with just some generic Walmart brand bed liner spray, and that's what a lot of this car is painted in. Honestly, the fenders are painted in bed liner spray, the fender wells. There's some more welding we had to do because the whole frickin' where the battery sits, totally rusted out there. It's kind of a new piece in there. The front, the radiator support here, this was all rusted out, so that's all down there welded on. That's fabricated. Honestly, this car was a fabricating nightmare, but everything has been done in just a little tiny garage in a house in Des Moines, Iowa. And this car was roached beyond belief. It's just going to take a ton of body work. Walk around here again. A ton of body work to bring it back. It actually has aluminum riveted in there, and then they just bonded over it, and it's cracking out now finally. But yeah, so that's our project now as she sits, and hopefully I can put in updates later. But she's coming along nicely, and she'll be pretty quick.